Oh, it's unboxing day. Yes, we have the brand new M2 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro with the maxed out M2 chip with 12 CPU cores and 38 GPU cores with 32 gigabytes of memory with a 1 terabyte drive. Now, this is technically, I guess, the most powerful MacBook Pro ever. And I am really excited to actually start using this, start running some initial tests on it, and then give you my first impressions because, listen, even though this is a spec bump upgrade, I am really excited to test out the second generation of Apple's Pro chips. And I got this and 2 other Mac Minis, which I'm also excited to test, but you have to wait for a later video before I give you my first impressions on that. Let's open up the 16-inch MacBook Pro. Okay, and as you can see, this is the new MacBook Pro box, which kind of looks a lot like the older M1 Pro 16-inch MacBook Pro box. And then let's open up the box. So we just tear that off. And there it is. Look at that, the beautiful 16-inch MacBook Pro. But first, let's set that aside. Let's see what else we have here. We have a, obviously, MagSafe charging cable. That's going to be MagSafe on one end, USB-C on the other. And now this is actually color matched better to this MacBook Pro. This is the space gray version, so it has the space gray color matching cable. If we open this up, we can also see some documentation, and of course, we always get our new Apple stickers. And actually, hold on, these are black Apple stickers. Are the Apple stickers in the MacBook Pro usually black, or is it because I got space gray? I remember them being white, or maybe I'm misremembering that for the M1 Pro generation. If you know the answer to that, let me know in the comments below. And obviously, we also have a power brick. This is actually a pretty beefy power brick for this 16-inch MacBook Pro. It's bigger than the one that you get on the 14-inch model, and it actually totals 140 watts. Let's get back to the MacBook Pro. Let's open this up, and as you can see, hey, it's pretty much the same MacBook Pro design that we had with the 2021 models. You're not surprised about this. I don't even know why you're watching this part. You're probably like, why am I watching this guy unbox the same MacBook Pro that I've already seen for the past 2 years? Well, because you like Macs, I guess. But yeah, let's go ahead and actually power this thing on and run some benchmarks. But first, let me actually set this up, and then we can go over those benchmarks. Okay, I am back. I have set up the 16-inch MacBook Pro fully. I have downloaded some benchmarks that I want to run on this machine to kind of see how fast it is. And yeah, let's go ahead and explore this together. So the first benchmark that I want to run is Geekbench. Geekbench is a great benchmark to run because it runs on so many different platforms, and it's not that intensive of a benchmark, but it does give you kind of this like number representation of how fast your machine's going to be in single core and multi-core performance. It's like the gold standard of benchmarks. Everyone runs it on phones, tablets, and laptops and desktops, all that stuff. So let's run Geekbench and see how this new M2 Max chip scores. And it scores well. So you can see we get a single core score of 2,064 and a multi-core score of 15,340. But you know, the Geekbench is it's a pretty simple benchmark. So let's actually go over to Cinebench. That's a more intensive CPU benchmark. And with Cinebench in particular, I kind of want to test if the 16-inch version of the MacBook Pro heats up anymore, because what we know from the M2 chip is that technically it runs a little bit hotter. So I want to see if like the MacBook Pro gets overly hot when running a Cinebench benchmark. So I ran the Cinebench benchmark for about 10 minutes, and at the end of it, we can see we got a pretty high multi-core score of 14,802. But more importantly, this was a benchmark that was running continuously using maximum CPU power for the past 10 minutes. So I actually touched the top of the MacBook Pro, and yeah, it was a little bit warm, but I didn't notice the fans like spinning like super loudly or anything like that. Actually, the fan from my light were louder than the fans in the MacBook Pro. I didn't even really hear the MacBook Pro fan spin up, but I was just being drowned out by that noise. So it seems, at least thermally, for just doing like CPU stuff, the extra cores in here, and technically they're extra efficiency cores, the higher clocked cores in the M2 Max chip aren't offering too much of a hit to at least to the 16-inch model. Now, obviously, one of the bigger upgrades for the Max chip has nothing to do with CPU performance, because technically you can get an M2 Pro and an M2 Max with the same CPU performance, but the M2 Max really shines in the GPU department, and this one has 38 GPU cores. So let's actually run a optimized metal benchmark. So for this, I decided to use the Aztec Ruins high tier benchmark in 4K off screen. And this is, again, a very optimized metal benchmark. So as we run the benchmark, you can see at the end, the M2 Max chip scores 11,537 frames with an overall 179 frames per second. Now, I believe when I did this test on my older 16-inch M1 Max, it wasn't even the 4K version of this. So this is a pretty high score from what I can remember using it on the 4K benchmark for other Macs that I've tested. So, I mean, GPU performance seems to be pretty good theoretically, at least if it's optimized. Let's go ahead now and also test the disk speed. So for this, I loaded up the Blackmagic disk speed test, and I was actually pretty surprised here, because when I was doing this test, I was expecting to be getting the same numbers as the last version of this MacBook Pro with the 1 terabyte drive. That actually had slower read and write speeds than what was offered on the 4 and 8 terabyte model. But it looks like Apple gave us like a secret hidden upgrade here, because the 1 terabyte version, and I assume the 512 gigabyte version and the 2 terabyte version, actually have faster write speeds this year, now featuring over 6,000 megabytes a second for the write speed. But the read speed is about the same, about 5,000 megabytes per second on that read speed. But again, these are super fast SSDs. Before to get speed around this performance, you would have to get the 4 or 8 terabyte models. So it's good that Apple is making the lower tiered storage options faster as well. So this is a nice, pleasant surprise with these new MacBook Pros. But let's finish off these tests with an actual kind of more real world test. We're gonna do a Final Cut Pro export. First, we're gonna do it in H.264, and then we are going to do it in ProRes. So let's start this thing up. Let's start the engines on the M2 Max chip. Okay, for this first test, I am just using a very simple 4K clip. It's just one clip, one 4K layer, and we're exporting that to H.264. And as you can already see, this thing is pretty speedy, but the M1 Max chip before this was also speedy. So, let's see how much. Is there really a noticeable difference here? So as we're rounding out this 4K export in H.264, this 16-inch M2 Max finishes at 2 minutes and 56 seconds, which is pretty speedy. But if I'm being honest, it doesn't seem like a huge difference from what I'm remembering when I did these export tests in Final Cut on the initial M1 Pro and M1 Max machines. So it's fast, don't get me wrong, 3 minutes for a 10-minute clip is fast, but it's not mind-blowing. It's not groundbreaking like the first generation of those Pro Apple Silicon chips were. And that makes sense, right? This is a spec bump update. That last one was an entire architecture change. Now let's do a ProRes export. From what I can remember from my tests when I did them all the way back on the M1 Pro and M1 Max MacBook Pros, was that ProRes was really, really speedy. So let's go ahead and do a Final Cut export there. And as we start this ProRes export, you can already see that this M2 Max MacBook Pro is just speeding through this export. And as we get to the end of it, you can see that it only took 1 minute and 15 seconds to export a 10-minute 4K ProRes clip in Final Cut Pro. And again, that is really speedy. But I remember when I did these tests a while ago that the other MacBook Pros were also pretty speedy. But hey, it's nice that you can export a clip in 1 minute, around 1 minute. I mean, that's nothing to like bash, right? This is really fast performance out of this machine. But now one final test does remain. I do have to edit this video. I have to edit this video, and I think I'm gonna edit it, and I'm gonna come back and tell you about it. Yes, the video, or at least the part that you watched. Obviously, I have to edit this part into the video once I'm done recording this, but at least everything you saw so far was edited on the 16-inch M2 Max MacBook Pro, and I actually did a little bit, I guess, of like a small battery test too, because when I took this and started editing, my battery was at 50%. And let's see what it is now. Well, it's at 34%. So I guess it lost about 15% of the battery life. And it took me about a little over an hour, I guess, to edit this video in Final Cut Pro. So an hour of use in Final Cut Pro, draining about 15% battery life yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. So anyway, editing performance in this machine, no hiccups, right? It's a very simple video. This is not a complex video. These are very simple to make, but it's 4K, probably like 2 or 3 streams of 4K max, and just some audio processing and slight color grading kind of stuff. But yeah, the M2 Max MacBook Pro with 32 gigabytes of memory handled this like a champ. There was literally not one hiccup during this entire edit. Everything was smooth. And I'm very happy with that. But again, that's kind of like the experience I already have on my 14-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro. So to me, it doesn't seem like a noticeable improvement in terms of performance, but it's kind of like I wasn't reaching that limit already. So this only gives me more headroom to work with. Yeah, first impressions of this computer. Obviously, there is new things with it. Like it does have Wi-Fi 6E, but I can't test that. I'm at my studio. I actually don't have Wi-Fi 6E, a Wi-Fi 6E router at the studio, and there's not Wi-Fi 6E speeds that I'm using in the studio. So I can't test that. I do have that at home though, so I can test that later when I go home for a future video. And then also HDMI 2.1 on this, which can do 8K video output, but then also can do 4K video output at 120 hertz or 240 hertz max. And I actually do have a TV at home that I use as a monitor sometimes that uses HDMI, and it can do 4K at 120 hertz. So again, that's something I can test in the future. But just in terms of testing out this MacBook Pro, the experience is pretty much the same as I've been used to for over a year now on my M1 Max MacBook Pro. Obviously, this is the 16-inch version, so having the bigger screen is nice when you're editing. It's nice to have a little bit of extra screen real estate. But yeah, the screen is just as gorgeous as my older model. It's a mini LED display. It's smooth. It's 120 hertz. The speakers on it are great, right? Like these are all things that you know already if you watched any review of the older MacBook Pro. But the only thing I can say is that, yeah, it's a little bit better now. It's a spec bump upgrade. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a little bit better now, and that's great. So first impressions are obviously really strong. I liked my old laptop. I like this new laptop. So would I recommend it? Yeah, of course I'd recommend the 14 or 16-inch MacBook Pro. And I hope that you found this video ultimately pretty helpful. One last thing though, before I go, I did run into someone at the Apple store today that recognized me. So I wanted to give them a shout out. Thank you so much for helping me out. I know it was a little bit awkward, our interaction, because at first he was like, you kind of, are you Greg's Gadgets? You look like him. And I was like, I'm awkward. So I'm like, oh no, I'm like socially anxious, and I was like scared, like, oh no, someone recognized me. So I was like, oh no, it's not me. But then I was like, oh, it is actually me. It is me. So, thank you for the kind words. He said I had a good channel, so I really appreciate that. Actually, if you're watching this video, leave a comment down below. Maybe we can find this person. We can pin the comment there. That'd actually be pretty cool to do. So Apple Store employee, I didn't catch your name, but Apple Store employee, if you're watching this video by any chance, thank you again for all your help. Drop a comment down below. If you liked this video, everyone else watching please give me a like. If you want to see more from the channel, including I got the new M2 Mac Mini and the M2 Pro Mac Mini. If you want to see videos on those, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Probably got a lot more Mac content coming your way, including a full review of this 16-inch MacBook Pro, because again, I just got this today. It is not fair to do a full review on it. I got to spend a lot more time with this device and see if that extra power is going to help out in any way, and see, if the improvements here offer any big quality of life improvements. So wait for the full review. But as for now, I really like this machine, and thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.